What if I asked you to introduce yourself without mentioning your job or what you do for a living? Could you do it? For most of us, our occupations have become so intertwined with our identities that removing them would leave us feeling strangely incomplete. We are psychologically and socially conditioned to define our worth by the work we do. And think about it. When you meet someone new, one of the first questions asked is, what do you do? Our careers have become modern-day stamps of validation and status symbols that largely shape how we see ourselves and how others perceive us. The doctor, the teacher, the accountant, the construction worker. We instantly form impressions and make judgments based on these occupational labels. But I invite you to consider an intriguing proposition. Never tell people what you do. Resist the urge to present that initial handshake introduction of, hi, I'm a dent. Don't allow yourself to be strictly defined and potentially limited by your job title or role, because the truth is, you are infinitely more than any occupation or profession. You are a boundless creative force and wise spiritual being having a temporary human experience. Who would you be without that label? What aspects of your identity arise when you aren't confined to others' expectations about your career? Imagine interactions where there is an air of mystery about what you do that sparks curiosity rather than quick categorization, where you aren't immediately put in a box based on your work, but have the freedom to express yourself as a complete individual. Let this question linger for a moment. If you didn't tell anyone what you did for a living, how would you introduce yourself? What stories would you share? What parts of your humanity would you highlight? Maybe you'd bond over your charitable efforts, your role as a parent, your adventures traveling the world, or your creative artistic expression. Without the job title fence, you could share the vastness of who you are. Let's take a deeper look at why defining ourselves solely by our occupational label is so limiting. When was the last time you met someone at a social gathering and they introduced themselves without stating what they did for work? It's rare, isn't it? We're socially hardwired to immediately put each other into categorized boxes based on career titles. But consider this. The moment you tell someone you're a doctor, lawyer, teacher, or any other profession, you inadvertently start playing a role based on their predetermined expectations of that job. You're no longer seen as a complete, multidimensional human being, but rather through the narrow lens of your work persona. Your personality traits, interests, values, and other vital parts of your identity get filtered out behind that label. For example, when you say, I'm a doctor, some people might assume you're highly intelligent, yet impersonal and all about the science and data. But what if you're actually a doctor who is deeply spiritual, loves creative writing, and volunteers with underprivileged kids? Those unique aspects of who you are get buried under the stereotype. Imagine you're an accountant who introduces yourself as such. Many might quickly categorize you as someone who is analytical and boring based on occupational stigmas, when in reality, you're an incredibly funny, adventurous person who loves skydiving and performs in an improv comedy troupe. By allowing your job title to precede you, you've unintentionally created false impressions that prevent people from truly seeing you. His pigeonholing is restrictive, not just for how others view you, but for how you view yourself. When you lead with your career, you start unconsciously deprioritizing all the other multifaceted elements that make you whole. You get stuck in rigid, one-dimensional thought patterns about what someone in your line of work should think, feel, and act like. It's as if you're putting on a confined mask, hiding the weird, wild, wonderfully complex truth of your humanity behind a sanitized, socially acceptable facade. You stop expressing outrageous opinions, eccentric hobbies, or any behaviors deemed incongruent with how you should conduct yourself per your job's unspoken rules and identity. Don't you want to be seen accepted and loved for all of your beautifully unique strangeness, rather than having to mold yourself into limiting professional archetypes? Don't you want the freedom to surprise people with unexpected facets of your personality that defy their stereotypes? To creatively share yourself without filter or fear of judgment from those boxes they're trying to stuff you into. Imagine you're at a party, surrounded by an energetic mix of new and familiar faces. Someone approaches you, and instead of the typical opening line of "What do you do for work?" they simply smile and say, "Tell me something interesting about yourself." Wouldn't that spark a sense of intrigue and curiosity? An opportunity to share a unique truth that gives them a richer glimpse into the depths of who you are beyond any label. This is the power of embracing an air of mystery about what you do professionally, rather than immediately being boxed into a limiting set of expectations. An element of the unknown creates a refreshing openness in how others perceive you. They can't make assumptions or project cliche types onto a blank slate. You're beginning the interaction from a place of authenticity, free from rigid identities. Their assumptions become unlocked, allowing space for you to express yourself without filters or censors. To openly share the beautiful strangeness and seemingly contradictory facets that make you, maybe you'll surprise them with tales of your passion for rock climbing, balanced with your love of crocheting tiny animal sculptures, or how your analytical day job is fueled by your nightly readings of whimsical fantasy novels and avant-garde poetry. See how this Uri of mystery invites a genuine sense of childlike wonder, curiosity, and permission to be amazingly complex. You're no longer forcing anyone to make room for the real multidimensional you within the confines of an occupational archetype. Instead, you're enticing them to remove those conceptual blinders and perceive your full humanity without preconception. This experience of revealing yourself piecemeal, letting compelling fragments unfurl like the petals of an exotic flower, is deeply liberating. You get to decide what stories, talents, and quirks to highlight in order to creatively introduce the depth of your spirit, to let them see the vivid kaleidoscope of your reality rather than reducing you to a dull monochrome imposed by their assumptions. I've personally found that applying this mindset of mystery to my own interactions has been powerfully transformational. No longer anchored by a prescribed identity, I feel free to playfully improvise and express different angles of who I am. I might share about my passion for world religions and ancient philosophies, or regale someone with tales of getting stranded in rural Slovenia after a map's mishap. This openness awakens their sense of curiosity, leading them to eagerly ask more questions that let me peel back new layers, perhaps dazzling them with the tidbit that I co-founded a breakthrough health app or perform comedy routines at nursing homes on weekends. Each new reveal introduces a riveting new dimension that enriches their perception beyond any limiting categories. Can you sense how this tantalizing practice creates a spellbinding effect, where there is no need to immediately define or explain my entirety? How it activates an energy of wonder, playfulness, and mystery that magnetizes people rather than giving them a closed book of who I am. It allows them to co-create a rich narrative about my life rather than making flawed assumptions. More importantly, it gives me sovereign freedom to present myself openly without censoring my essence to fit others' rigid boxes. You can probably sense how tremendously liberating it would be to transcend the labels and limitations we've been programmed with since birth, to remove those restrictive masks and reveal the brilliant, multidimensional truth of who you are in totality. But such a radical shift in your way of being requires conscious repatterning of the deeply ingrained beliefs about needing to define yourself by your occupation. I'd like to share some powerful mantras and affirmations I've found tremendously helpful in this process. Statements you can recite daily to begin chipping away at those self-limiting thought patterns and ego identifications. Simple yet profound reminders to anchor you in the truth of your limitless nature beyond any titles or roles. What if you began each morning by gazing in the mirror and stating with conviction, I am an infinite spiritual being having a temporary human experience. Let those words really land. You're not just a physical form bounded by time and space, but a radiant consciousness co-creating this reality. An eternal essence merely inhabiting a fleeting physical vessel and series of roles during this incarnation. Your worth and totality transcend any labels, boxes, or constricted identities. Another potent mantra. I am far more than any single career, occupation, or title. Repeat that anytime you feel tempted to solidify yourself into the rigid constraints of your job. You are an ever-evolving, multifaceted phenomena, too kaleidoscopic and vast to be entirely summarized by what you do to pay your bills. Any flat descriptions, no matter how lofty, are incapable of capturing the brilliant depth of your being. And how about this affirmation? I am the author of my truest self, not society's expectations. So often we unconsciously take on limited self-concepts based on what culture deems acceptable or impressive. We mold and censor our personalities to align with the identities assigned to different professions. But you have a sacred right to be outrageously, unapologetically yourself in each moment without having to fit any boxes. You alone define your unique essence. My hum anchoring your days with resonant statements, like my humanity has no borders. I will not be contained or confined. I am ever unfolding, ever expressing, ever exploring my infinite potential. Curiosity. When mystery create my reality, not rows of boundaries. Let these words anchor you in a place of openness, possibility, and unlimited becomingness beyond tired stereotype. You could even keep sticky note reminders around like some brilliant chaos. Not labels or I cannot be summarized to interrupt those unconscious patterns, to reduce and define yourself, or set phone alarms throughout the day with prompts like time to introduce myself in a new way. These are just some examples of the perspective shifts and mental reprogramming that empowers you to burst forth from constricting narratives. Fiddly. These mantras create expansive new neural pathways where you automatically identify solely with your boundless core being rather than reflexively clinging to externally imposed personas and identity. You become anchored in a reality of limitless self-expression and perpetual awe, no longer feeling obliged to appease others' boxes and assumptions. Let's look at some inspiring examples of luminaries throughout history who embodied this ethos of transcending labels and resisting being put in boxes. Individuals who lived in a liberated state of constant becoming, introducing an ever-unfolding sense of mystery about their life's purpose. A prime example is the brilliant polymath Leonardo da Vinci. Was he merely a painter, a sculptor, an inventor, an architect, an engineer, a scientist, an anatomist? Trying to confine him to any singular identity or title seems laughable when you consider his prolific mastery across so many diverse domains. Da Vinci seemed to operate from a state of infinite curiosity and creative expression that made him completely untethered to any occupation-based identity. Can you imagine him at a dinner party in his day, introducing himself strictly as I am an artist or I am an inventor? Those labels would have barely scratched the surface of capturing his kaleidoscopic genius and passion for incessantly exploring new frontiers of knowledge, by never allowing himself to be solely defined by one profession. Da Vinci opened himself to mind-blowing levels of innovation and mastery across multiple disciplines simultaneously. His aura of complexity and refusal to be pigeonholed was likely key to his legendary Renaissance impact. We see similar examples in creative trailblazers like Prince or David Bowie, who both delighted in reinventing their personal and artistic identities consistently. They didn't stick to one stagnant persona, pound or image, but rather seemed to express themselves as an ever-evolving artistic dream state, always initiating a fresh era of transformation and leaving fans wondrously guessing about their next ingenious self-revolution. By resisting category and embracing shape-shifting identities, they opened interdimensional portals into realms of boundless imagination and inspiration that kept their work feeling vitally relevant and cemented their status as cultural icons for all. Had they allowed themselves to get boxed into one specific identity up front, their impact and longevity would have been drastically diminished. We saw this play out in the worlds of science and spirituality as well. Innovators like Nikola Tesla or enlightened sages like Nisargadatta Maharaj seemed to operate from a spacious hub of pure presence and curiosity that made them allergic to being defined by any one occupation or teaching. Imagine if Tesla had introduced himself as solely an electrical engineer, or Nisargadatta as an Indian spiritual guru. Their true essence and impact was their eternal spirit of seeking, questioning, and embodying the vast mysteries of the universe in their words and work. Any attempt to label or summarize them would barely scratch the surface of capturing their multi-layered genius and wisdom. It's this eternal place of childlike awe, humility, and receptivity to reinventing themselves that seem to give these thought leaders their timeless power and ability to shatter limited human conceptions of what's possible. They show us what's capable when we remove self-imposed ceilings on our potential and open to the unbounded creative flow of perpetual self-expression. I can sense that for many of you. The notion of never revealing what you do for a living may feel radically confronting, even anxiety-inducing. Our conditioning around needing an occupational identity to legitimize our worth is so deeply ingrained that resisting it can trigger all sorts of fears and doubts. Perhaps you're worried that without stating your job title, you'll risk not being taken seriously by others. There's a misguided belief that we need those status symbols and roles to command respect and credibility. We've been taught that our careers are how we gain significance in society's eyes. I get it. There's a very real fear of being dismissed as a flaky slacker or treated as insignificant if we can't immediately validate our importance with an impressive occupation. Our egos are attached to those external badges of honor as a way to feel purposeful and valuable to the world around us. Or maybe you have a lurking doubt around your own self-worth and sense of purpose, if not defined by your work identity. We've been conditioned that what we do is quintessentially tied to who we are at our core. Take that away, and there can be an untethering sense of, well, if I'm not my job title, then what am I? Who am I? It can open up an existential void that leaves us feeling frighteningly rudderless. For so many, our careers have become not just what we do, but who we are. They provide psychological reinforcement of our reason for being. Without that framing, there's a twinge of panic, as if our entire life purpose gets called into question. Then there are the social fears around being perceived as strange or arrogant if we don't explicitly state what we do. We've all been in those situations where someone proudly announced their high-powered career, prompting approving nods from the group and a clear delineation of their status and hierarchical ranking. Not playing into that norm can come across as pompous or cagey, like we're being intentionally evasive or toying with some misguided attempt at appearing mysterious and above it all. There's a distinct worry about being the arrogant weirdo in the room that nobody can immediately size up and categorize into their worldview. And if we do decide to be radically honest and admit we don't wish to state our occupation, there's a chance we'll face skepticism, criticism, or even overt ridicule. Just imagine announcing to your family over the holidays that from now on, you won't be identifying yourself by your job anymore because you're a limitless spiritual being. You can practically hear the awkward silence and raised eyebrows already. For so many, shedding that security blanket of an occupational identity can feel like leaping into a scary chasm of the unknown. All the old scripts and pre-programmed social guidelines suddenly get ripped away, leaving us exposed and vulnerable to judgment, criticism, and the existential questioning of our fundamental purpose. I won't deny that these fears and doubts have legitimate roots thanks to our heavy cultural conditioning. But I also won't shy away from stating the profound truth that these are ultimately limiting beliefs and stories we tell ourselves. Stories that cap our infinite potential and restrict us from expressing the radiant totality of our being. What if I told you that the very notion of having a fixed identity or rigid definition of who you are is itself an illusion? That you are not a static finished product to be summarized, but rather an ever-evolving, perpetually unfolding creative force in constant flow and reinvention. Would you be willing to step into that truth and lifestyle of eternal becoming? Think about it. The labels and occupational identities we cling to are trapping us in a limited point in time, snapshot that can never fully encapsulate the vastness of our potential across multiple lifetimes. They are reductionist anchors, forcing us into categorized boxes that restrict the amazingly complex, multi-dimensional landscape of our soul's expression. When you say, I'm a doctor or I'm an accountant, you're essentially putting a conceptual ceiling on yourself in that moment, solidifying one of the infinite experiences and forms your wise spirit has chosen to temporarily inhabit during this human journey. In doing so, You forfeit acknowledging all the other blessed layers of your being that extend far beyond any single role or title. What if instead you chose to melodically live your life from an empowered state of constant unfoldment and evolution? A divine dance of being where you are ceaselessly outgrowing outmoded identities and expressing unexplored facets of your inherent brilliance. Can you imagine the profound creative freedom in that level of openness and fluidity? No longer would you be a static, one-dimensional character playing out the same loopy role again and again based on society's limited parameters. But rather you become an ecstatic artist, painting reality's cosmic canvas with a fresh brush of authenticity in each new interaction. An eternal spirit unshackling itself from the inhibiting labels, limitations, and boxes that dim your incandescent shine. You get to awaken anew each day as sacred mystery, as pure potential pregnant with infinite possibilities not yet birthed into manifestation. Every encounter becomes an opportunity for surprising turns of spontaneous expression and unbounded truth-telling, unhampered by learned scripts of how you should show up for your titles. Just imagine how exhilarating and empowering that perpetual unfolding would be. How expansive and spacious you could be within yourself and your life, released from the psychic contractions of prescribed roles and checking the boxes of who you're supposed to be at any given stage. The stance of conscious becoming births such profound gift after gift. The ability to continually reinvent your reality in increasingly imaginative and resonant ways aligned with your ever-stretching growth and evolution. The humility and awe to hold your identities, achievements, and successes lightly, gracefully releasing them to embrace new expressions of your soul's longing. You are liberated to fearlessly explore novel domains, unburdened by narratives of whether undertaking X, Y, or Z is coherent with the labeled self you've presented to the world so far. Every experience and experiment becomes a portal to integrate fresh riches and insights that can fertilize your metamorphosis into wider spheres of fulfillment and service. Upheavals are no longer existential crises undermining your identity, but wildly anticipated cycles of renewal to shed old skins and emerge transcendent. Can you feel the emancipating spaciousness and power in choosing to author your existence from that radical place of perpetual blooming? How it restores you to that original state of childlike presence and freedom you were born into before your parents, teachers, and culture started forming your concrete identities and drip-feeding your limiting beliefs about who you are. So now I invite you to boldly embrace this revolutionary practice of never telling people what you do for a living, to step into the liberated reality of being a forever unfolding, infinitely faceted spirit having this temporary human experience. I can sense some of you feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation at this prospect. That's perfectly natural when you're being called to make such a radical shift in your way of being and expressing yourself to the world. Decades of cultural conditioning around defining yourself by your career can create some pretty stubborn buckles to unclasp. But just imagine the profound sense of authenticity and sovereignty you'll experience when you start introducing an air of delicious mystery about what you do professionally. The magic of people's assumptions falling away as they become cracked open to the vastness of your true self beyond those confining boxes and labels. Visualize the childlike wonder that arises as you begin to organically peel back layers through intriguing personal anecdotes and quirky admissions about your eccentric hobbies and side hustles. The way curiosity gets piqued when you alchemize each interaction into a co-created journey of mutual exploration into the depth of your kaleidoscopic humanity. Sense the profound inner spaciousness and creative freedom to improvise that comes when your entire being is no longer biographically restricted by the predefined scripts and personas of how someone with your job is supposed to act. Every moment becomes a fertile playground to reinvent the way you engage with reality and present unexplored angles of who you truly are. And can you feel the mental liberation of no longer being psychologically tethered to stagnant occupational identities that put false ceilings on your infinite potential for growth and expansion? Of shifting into an eternal stance of conscious becoming where you get to awaken anew each day a sacred possibility not yet realized. This is the emancipating power of never telling people what you do again, of resisting the temptation to shrink your gorgeous strangeness into dehydrated job titles and neat little categories that only skim the surface of capturing your soul's essence. So let this be a daring invitation to finally live in radical alignment with that kaleidoscopic truth, to embrace an enchanting stance of mystery that magnetizes people into your depths rather than getting typecast into reductive trope, to embody the courage of infinite reinvention and perpetual unfurling into the yet to be experienced dimensions of your spirit's longing. Starting today, I encourage you to consciously experiment with introducing yourself in novel ways that illuminate unexpected facets of who you are separate from your work identity. Delight in upending people's assumptions and deliciously cultivating an air of curiosity about the truth of your being that extends far beyond tidy occupational summaries. Let this be a joyous celebration of your amazingly weird complexity and creative courage to transcend society's limited perceptions around what determines validity and importance. A reclamation of your sovereign right to obliterate all boxes and author the breathtaking specificity of your path from a place of unbound self-trust in every emergent revelation. Because the most stunningly subversive offering you can make in this world is to simply be yourself, your entire self, without apology or edit. Brilliant, paradoxical, messy, and utterly unsummarizable. A living masterpiece whose denouement continually surprises and awakens with new permutations of awareness we have yet to conceive. So step into that mystery with me now. Unveil yourself new in each encounter and prepare to magnificently disorient all who've been lulled into the slumber of thinking they had you figured out. You are a holy birth defying their labels and limits with each blessed breath. Dare let that phenomenal truth shine.